Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a couple weeks. I had an unexpected move pop up and life got a little chaotic, but I'm finally settled in and ready to get back to making delicious, budget-friendly meals. And actually, settled in might be too strong of a word because it's still going to take me a few weeks to get everything back to the way it was. And I do want to say you might recognize my kitchen as being very similar, and that's because I basically just moved units in the same complex, but you'll notice my refrigerator is now on the right side instead of the left, and I think my stove is a different model from the last one that I had. And I'll give you more details on why I had to move later in the video. The weather has definitely turned here in Southern California, and it has been cold outside. We've even had some rain, and I've been thinking for the last 2 weeks about making a homemade tomato soup. Especially for this video, I was thinking it would be a great use of pantry items. I'm going to start with a can of diced tomatoes. Obviously, you can make this with a can of tomato sauce. You can also use some whole fresh tomatoes and roast those, but I do love the idea of using canned tomatoes to make this soup. I've made homemade tomato soup quite a few times, but I don't usually use onion in it. But I did notice in perusing some of the online recipes that some of the most popular ones did have onions, and I do have onion, so I'm going to go ahead and add some into my soup this time. And this soup is basically just going to have tomatoes, onions, and salt and pepper. And I did grab this bouillon out of the pantry just in case I need some additional flavor. I thought that I would use about 1/4 of an onion, but use just as much as you want depending on if you like onions or not. And of course, if you don't like onions, you can make a delicious tomato soup without onions. But onions are a powerhouse of flavor, especially when they're cooked, obviously, because they do become sweet and caramelized and just add so much to the dish. So when I saw all of the popular recipes for tomato soup that included onions, I thought I definitely wanted to try that in mine. I've got this bread that I bought at Trader Joe's. This is one of the kinds I usually like to get. And unfortunately, I didn't have any Ziploc bags, and I was in the process of moving. And so these ends got kind of dried out. And so instead of a grilled cheese, which I thought I would do like an open faced grilled cheese, but I think I'll end up just cutting these into cubes and then maybe just throwing them on top of the soup and add a little cheese on there, and that'll make a good meal because I do need to use these somehow. I don't want them to go to waste. And then I'm just going to toast these so they're a little bit crispy. As far as the tomatoes go, I actually think whole tomatoes would be better. There is this minestrone soup at Olive Garden that I love so much because the tomatoes are so soft. When you bite into them, they just kind of melt in your mouth. And with these diced tomatoes, they put an ingredient in them actually to help them hold their structure. And so they're not going to disintegrate no matter how long I cook them, quite like whole tomatoes would be. But this is all that I have on hand. And actually, a kind of chunky tomato soup is sounding good to me. So I think I'll probably end up blending part of it. And then I tasted the onion just to make sure I wasn't getting these too done. And they tasted nice and caramely and delicious. So now I'm going to go ahead and add in my tomatoes and then cook those for a good long while. And my toasted bread cubes are ready to go as soon as my soup is ready. And it has been simmering for a while. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a spoon and then give it a taste test and see if I need to adjust my seasonings anymore. It smells delicious. It's been so cold, and this is exactly the kind of meal that I want to be eating. This has so much flavor. It's hard to believe there's only two main ingredients in here, but this is fabulous, and it has that rich umami flavor that I love so much from tomatoes. I was debating on whether I wanted to eat this completely blended or whether I wanted to leave it chunky, and I think I'll just use my immersion blender and do kind of a combination of both chunky and blended. So I'll blend like half of it and then leave the rest in chunks. I love this immersion blender. It comes in so handy for soups. I just love it. This will help to thicken it, but yet I'll still get some of those chunks. I have this Cabot sharp cheddar, and this is the lactose-free version. So I'm just gonna shred a little bit of this and throw on top of the cubes. I'm sure it'll be fine without anything, but I just had in mind that I wanted to do a grilled cheese. So I'm just trying to make like a deconstructed version of it, and I think this will be good. I decided to add my toasted cubes into the pan and then dip out into a bowl. I probably should have just added these directly into the bowl, but they were so hard. I was worried that they weren't gonna get soft enough for me. And then I also wanted to melt the cheese. So I wanted to use the pan lid to cover these for just a few minutes to get these melted. And here's my final soup. I did forget to add in the basil towards the end, so I just added a sprinkle on top. And this is a nice thick soup, and I'm gonna take a bite of tomato first. This is really hitting the spot. It is unbelievably comforting and delicious and full of flavor. It's interesting that you don't have an overwhelming flavor of onions. In fact, they just kind of blend in and really help to season the soup well. And it smells so good that even Misha was wanting some of this, but I don't think she realizes what it is she's asking for, or surely she would not want it. The toasted bread did soften up quite a bit, so I think adding the chunks in to the soup as I eat it is the best way to go. And I did toast another piece to eat along with this. So this was actually quite filling, and it was reminding me of that soup I made like a couple years ago. It was like a Italian peasant soup with bread and tomatoes, and that was delicious. And on that one, I think we added some fresh basil to the top, and that really added a lot to the soup. But I really did enjoy this, and I ate every last drop. I bought some pre-packaged items during the move, and I got this butternut squash from Trader Joe's, and it is so delicious. I wanted to show you guys how I make this. It is just like my newest favorite food. Honestly, it's just that good. I've roasted this before, but I've never tried it in the air fryer, and it just is like 10 times better in the air fryer than it is in the oven. So if you've never tried it in there, I just have to say that it's, first of all, it's going to give your house a great aroma, but it does something very special to this. And I just kind of rinse it off, and then I sprayed it with a little oil, and then I'm just going to add in some salt and pepper. So my place is still in a little bit of a shambles. I don't have everything put away yet. And I was going to tell you the reason we had to move is because they came and they did an annual check on our place, and we were informed, along with quite a few other people, that they had to do repairs. And I guess they found some mold here, which we knew that we had mold now and then because I would get it on my windows, and also it was a thing in the bathroom. We would constantly be cleaning mold. And I thought it was just a situation for, living on the coast. Like that's something that you deal with here. Look how nicely these turned out. It just smells amazing. The scent seems so much better when you use the air fryer than just roasting in the oven. And then these just taste kind of like candy. They're just so delicious. I love them so much. I'll probably be eating these a lot in the next couple months. Anyway, as far as my move goes, we were told that the repairs would take a minimum of 21 days, possibly longer, and we weren't allowed to stay in the property. They ended up giving us a substantial credit, actually, and so that we were able to hire some movers. But I was notified about this via an email on Thursday night, and I ended up taking Friday off so that I could go and see if there was like a model match in the community that I could go to instead of trying to rent an Airbnb, because in my town, it would have been very expensive to get even a temporary place to stay. So I found out about this on a Thursday. I looked for another place on a Friday in the same community, and then I packed on Saturday, and then on Sunday, the movers helped us to move. But of course, it was still exhausting for us because we had to pack everything up, and we did move some of the items ourselves. But then the majority of the furniture and all of that kind of items, the movers got. And it was the first time that I've ever hired a mover, and it was so worth it because the place that I moved to was actually not on the ground floor. So yeah, it was very, very much well worth it. Anyway, what I'm showing you here is I decided that I wanted to try to use more of my pantry items. And so I hadn't been using that oatmeal. And I also had these peaches that I had purchased. We had quite a few pieces of fruit in there for our shakes. And then when the weather turned, we just stopped wanting the shakes. So I decided to use these peaches up in the oatmeal, and I also added a few nuts and a piece of this toast. And I love these peaches in this oatmeal. They're a little bit tart, and the oatmeal is a little bit too sweet for me, so it just makes a perfect balance. And here's my lunch that I made for work. I have some bok choy, some fresh green beans, and carrots. I love using fresh green beans because I always add those into my stir fries, and I like them so much better than canned. And I like to cook them a few different ways, usually with the garlic, sometimes with a little soy sauce, sometimes with a little of the chili oil. But today I just used a few drops of sesame oil and soy sauce. I added a cup of basmati rice, and then I had this tofu that I get at Trader Joe's. I use this when I'm running out of time. I just slice it up, put it in the air fryer, and I'm good to go. And that was my lunch for today. So right after our move, we had all of this rain in my area, and I got in my kitchen and made my Mexican spoon bread. In fact, I've made this like 3 or 4 times lately, and I've perfected the recipe. The first time I made it, I didn't have enough cornmeal, so I added half of a cup of cornmeal and half of a cup of the Jiffy mix, because I do have a lot of those Jiffy mixes, because every time they go on sale for like 50 cents, then I stock up on them. So I had all of these in my pantry. And so I decided to make my cornbread that way, and it turned out really well. Another thing is I was out of baking soda, which was what I normally called for in this recipe, and I substituted baking powder, and I discovered that I actually like it better that way. And instead of, I guess when you sub out baking powder for baking soda, you do like a 3-to-1. So I did like 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Anyway, I've revised that recipe. I'll put that in the comments for anyone that enjoyed that recipe, in case you want to try it. It is super delicious. And then I thought I would show you this soup that I made for my lunch. I've already sauteed some garlic and ginger and then added some water to the pan. And I had this Japanese sweet potato that I needed to use, so I decided to make that the center of my soup. I've also got some green beans and a carrot. And then for seasonings, I just added some turmeric and some salt and pepper. And then I decided today to add in some oregano, which I don't always use in my soups, but I just was in the mood for oregano today, so I added that in. And then I also wanted to add in some basil, but I know you're supposed to add this at the end of cooking, and so I set it aside, but every time I do that, I always forget to add it in. And then for my protein, I have these meatballs in the freezer. I love these, especially in winter, because I just brown these in the air fryer or toaster oven and then add them to my soup. I also added in some nutritional yeast. This adds a creamy umami flavor, and it also gives me some extra vitamins that I need, like B6 and B12, and it's just a few bucks at Trader Joe's, but that is completely optional. And I decided I needed some more acidity in this, so I decided to cut up one of these tomatoes that I have, these Kamado tomatoes that I like to buy at Trader Joe's, and add that to this because there will be some sweetness in the soup from that sweet potato, and I just think that that will really help. I think that the meatballs will help as well, but I let this simmer for a good long while just to develop those flavors. And apparently I was in such a hurry this morning that I forgot to film adding the meatballs, but I just cut up the meatballs and added to the soup, and it was really delicious. It was unusually sweet because of that sweet potato, but it was good. It was balanced out nicely by those meatballs and the tomatoes. Off to the right is a little container of chili garlic sauce. I always like to use that as a condiment for my soups. I'm so glad that we are back in soup season. I always look forward to having soup for lunch. That's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching this week's video, and thanks for hanging in there with me. I'm excited to get into the holiday videos, so I'll see you back here next week.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just wanna be on my own. Even in the darkest times, you give me hope. So